Every evolutionist who is a scientist knows that the fossil record of living things on this planet is an embarrassment to evolution theory. The problem is they just can't admit it. Most won't do so, at least, not publicly. But scientists do a sort of doublespeak. They're willing to make certain admissions when they talk to each other or share information with their peers. Rarely will they make the same admissions when speaking to the public. For example, if you see an evolutionist scientist on a television program, he's going to tell you that there's all kinds of evidence for evolution in this area and that area, including the fossils. But then when he's writing a science paper or a book targeted to his peers, he'll make an astonishing acknowledgement that the fossil record doesn't show the evidence of evolution evolutionists expect. And so they do a sort of doublespeak. But every scientist worth their salt knows the fossil record is a problem for evolution theory. The rock record just doesn't show the forms evolution would have produced had evolution been true. Evolution is the most preposterous idea ever put forth by man, with the exception of the idea that there is no such thing as God. It makes no sense, it's illogical, it contradicts science, and it's proven false. This idea that evolution has produced all of the various creatures that live in this world today and all of their astonishing features over time by countless generations of creatures is completely unsupported by the fossils. For example, if evolutionists say that one kind of living thing begat another type of living thing over time, you would have numerous generations of creatures changing incrementally, slowly, into the new type of creature, producing changes until the new creature comes fully into being. If that had happened, there would be so many transitional forms in the rock record that virtually every fossil we dig up would show evidence of evolution. But they just don't. There is no sequence of creatures we can lay on a table in fossil form and say this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and see any kind of evidence of clear transition from one living thing into another. In order to imagine evolution happening, in order to argue that there is evidence of evolution in the fossils, evolutionists do two things. They'll find two creatures with very similar homology, two varieties of the same kind of animal, like two fish of a particular species, or two whales of a particular type, and they'll put one next to the other and say, look, because they're shaped a bit differently, we can see the evolution happening. But shape isn't an anatomical feature. That's morphological. And as we know from living things, creatures vary quite a bit in their shape. That doesn't have anything to do with their transitioning towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism with a different anatomy. And so that's what evolutionists do with fossils. The other thing that they do is they'll take two creatures which are of different kinds, but still have a similarity in shape, like a human being and an ape. And because their skeletons are remarkably similar, they'll declare that one is evidence that is related to the other. But that's not evidence in itself. It doesn't show evolutionary transition. It just shows a similarity. It's not enough to show a similarity. You have to show the evolution happening to believe that evolution happened. And so evolutionists have a problem with the fossil record because the fossil record doesn't show any evidence of evolution. There are a few creatures that evolutionists can lay next to each other and say, look, you see the evolution happening? And it can look, if you're willing to believe, kind of like there may be evidence for evolution there, but only that's very few selected examples. When you look into the fossil record more, you'll find that these creatures were typically coexisting or something like that. And that ruins the whole idea for them. But they don't care. They keep on pushing the idea. The truth is, had evolution happened, it would have left countless transitional forms behind in the rock record. It just didn't. And so to explain this problem away, Niles Eldridge invented an idea called punctuated equilibrium. And it was heavily promoted by Harvard uh, paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould, the most eminent paleontologist of his time. And he said punctuated equilibrium works like this. Because evolution took place in spurts, it just so happens that the creatures that were transitional did not fossilize. They either rotted away or they were eroded away, or somehow something happened, this or that or the other, but just didn't leave a record of it happening. Basically, what they're saying is the absence of evidence is evidence that it happened. It's completely unscientific to believe punctuated equilibrium. It's no evidence of anything. It's an excuse for the absence of evidence. So this hangout is about whatever we talk about, but with a twist. The twist is the fossils don't show evolution, and they would had evolution taken place. There should be countless transitional forms. We should be able to line up fossils like a motion picture had evolution taken place and show this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one clearly show evolution happening. But they can't do that. And so there is no evidence of evolution in the rock record. Instead, what we see is creatures of the same kind with certain variation, fully formed. And this bespeaks of creation. So the fossil record actually supports creation, does not support evolution. And because it supports evolution, creation, and has an absence of evidence for evolution, the fossil record actually supports creation and refutes evolution theory. I'll leave the hangout open. Anybody interested in coming in to talk about this or anything else is welcome to come in. I'll be here, reading or something, with my microphone going. My microphone muted. Hey, Ernie, how are you?
I'm doing good. Evan, how about yourself?
I'm getting by. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I just walked my wife down to catch the bus a little while ago, and that's how we travel here in Jerusalem because gas is so darn expensive. So we do a lot of public travel. So
Yeah.
and now I'm back up here. I was just last night, actually, both of us last night were watching a video, a hangout you were in of Xbox's video where I missed your hangout on the giraffe, but
Mhm.
I was listening with my wife about the combination of that valve and the sponge, and that sponge, the base of the skull that works when the giraffe bends down to get water. And I thought just thought, wow, man, what another what another awesome cold slap in the face of evidence for intelligent design. I think it's just
Mhm.
crazy that people can dismiss that. And
Yeah.
then I heard one of the guys in there say, actually, I think it's a compensation for a poor design. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck?
Mhm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It's so clearly design, engineering at work, bad design. Of course, they say that about everything because they want to make it look like if God was to, it can't be a designer because if the design is bad, then obviously God didn't design it. So, but they haven't been able to prove anything is a bad design. What they can show, though, is that good designs have been damaged by mutation. We have evidence of that, like blue eyes, or diseases. Those are bad things created by the mutation process that evolutionists have been touting so long. Is a marvelous designer of good things, but all we have is evidence that it's destroying everything. So where's all these mutations that change organisms, anatomically slowly from one kind to another? Why don't we have any evidence of that? Instead, we just got a list of diseases caused by mutation as long as your arm. Kind of funny, isn't it?
Hmm.
Hmm. What happened to all that mutation that's the designer? Why can't we observe that happening? Why don't we see any organism today that shows it happening? Why isn't the fossil record full of it? Yeah, just doesn't add up somehow, does it? Funny that.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that video you just recently posted. That short segment of Ben Carson talking about the brain, the neuro scientist or whatever. I
Yeah,
guess he's
he's a
right.
neurosurgeon. He's one of the world's foremost neurosurgeons, and he was talking about how we get hearing into the brain. What happens when you hear things, starting from the ear all the way into the various features of the brain. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, Nephilim, I'm certainly not real knowledgeable on all that stuff, but I do really enjoy watching the animations of like the cell and neurology, also with the synapses firing in the brain and different little things. And then I talk about this with some of these atheists, and I hear these guys say, yeah, but here's all the problems, and this thing could have been designed so much better if it was designed by a perfect
Mm-hmm.
being. And I'm just like, man, you're looking at something that man hasn't even been able to touch the design of. They haven't even
Mm-hmm.
been able to mimic that. They can't even come close to doing anything like that with the greatest and smartest people walking the face of this earth. But you're going to sit there and look at that and tell us that it's not intelligent and that
Yeah,
and all the problems with it. It's one of the most amazing technologically advanced things in the universe. And
yeah,
yeah, that's crazy.
it is. I mean, just think about the human eye or any eye. I mean, it is mind bending engineering complexity and everything, and so many things that are happening at the absolutely minute scale in an eye to give you vision. And they're going to say it's a bad design. Man couldn't begin. to, if you gathered all of the greatest minds from all the fields of science, put them in one giant auditorium and said, here's our goal, guys. We're all going to get $1 million apiece if we can just make an eyeball from scratch. They'd all get up and walk out and say, forget it. It's never going to happen. They couldn't do it.
Yeah,
They couldn't even begin to do it, much less do anything like it. You know, it's amazing how complex with the rods and cones and the sequence of protein shape changes that are necessary, and the speed at which all this happens in order to constantly produce continuous vision in your eyes. It's utterly mind bending, and man can't even begin to approach that kind of technology.
and don't we actually, isn't the image taken in Nephilim upside down, and with the reflection it comes back and balances off right side up so that we can see it that way? Isn't didn't I am I correct on that?
Your eye records everything upside down. It's your brain that flips the image. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's there is a point of convergence of the light rays going in your eye, and they flip. So the image actually created on in the back of the eye is upside down. Yeah, upside down.
It's amazing, just like this sponge in the giraffe and the valve that you pointed out that had to that had to emerge simultaneously. Otherwise, it's kind of like a symbiotic thing going on within an organism that just couldn't have been there by itself. This thing too for our vision. I mean, we wouldn't have done much good seeing upside down. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like it's just perplexing to think that these
Yeah.
things gradually came about incrementally, and that they knew one. They say there's no goal for evolution. They say there's no direction. There's no conscious thought or behind any of this. There's no plan behind any of this, but yet these things just miraculously, uh, coincidentally come about. The same things come together at the same time that all need to fit, working together in a coordinated fashion to make it work. I think it's ridiculous to say otherwise.
It is ridiculous. Evolution is completely ridiculous. It's a ridiculous idea that is put forth by people who refuse to acknowledge we have a creator. That's all it is. And it is amazing that think about the eye in evolution. Since the eye in creatures flips the image, and it's actually the image created on the back of the eye, on the cornea, on the retina. I mean, is no, is it? Wait a minute, cornea. Yeah, is upside down. Uh, Try to imagine evolution trying to figure out, well, we got to flip this image so that we can operate. Otherwise, we're screwed, man. I keep reaching from the ground and I'm reaching up to the sky. You know, imagine evolution trying to somehow make something upside down seem right, flip it right side up. But what is the reasoning behind believing that organisms could facilitate such a process, even if you had an imaginary early eye? What would it would actually if it could be, if we could pretend for a minute that eyes did evolve and we had some early eye, not just a light sensitive patch covered with skin, but an eyeball in which an image is actually flipped upside down. Even if you could imagine there being such a thing as an early eye, okay, at that point, and possibly likely before, it would have been a disadvantage to the organism because it would likely, because gravity is pulling on the organism, and the organism already has a sense of direction, at least towards the earth, right, because of gravity. And then this would present a problem because it would contradict what they're feeling with their body. And so if that were true, you would think natural selection would remove it because it would disorient the organism. You see? But
Yeah.
evolutionists believe otherwise. They just think, well, evolution somehow fix that problem. Oh, really? Well, how can it fix that problem? How is it that this upside down image, which would completely disorient the organism once it started being able to see everything upside down, knowing its body has already become accustomed to living on a ground where gravity is pulling on it, it knows that much orientation, that it's on the earth, that it's, it knows where solid ground is and the air is above. It's already familiar with that. And then it begins to see this would contradict it, what it's feeling and what it's able to do already. It would be completely disoriented if the organism were somehow to believe that what it's seeing was a representation of what's in front of it. Then it would become disoriented because its body would be telling it, this is not right. I'm not moving in the right direction. I don't know what to do. I can't figure this out. I feel the earth, and I'm able to move around on the earth because I know the ground is below me, and yet what I'm seeing is wrong. I can't move because every time I move the wrong way. If I'm to believe what I'm seeing, now if I stick with what I'm feeling, then what I'm seeing is wrong, and it's really hard for me to get around because I'm trying hard not to believe one thing and believe the other. It's confusing. So that's what would happen. And so natural selection, if we were to believe natural selection would help this situation any, it should simply remove the I, because it would be simpler to just get rid of the I than it would to change the organisms so that it would have an understanding of its orientation based on gravity. That would have already been well established in the organism, at that point in evolution. So the I would go. So here again, we see just one more example of how natural selection contradicts evolution, because natural selection should remove the I. And it should remove everything that we're evolving, the anatomical, because it's non-functional yet. As it's evolving and coming into being, it's a burden to the organism's biochemistry because it requires energy to maintain, and it's not providing function until it's fully formed. And you can't say that some things could provide function, but lesser of a function or a different function until it gets to be what we see it as. And then now it has a completely different function, and everything is just something in transition. It's functional all the way, because we know of a lot of things that doesn't make sense for, like the chemical gun in the back end of the bombardier beetle, or a stinger in the tail of a scorpion. These are very specific, fully formed, functional things. Incrementally, they just don't work. The idea that they could be some kind of a lesser feature and still have function, it doesn't add up. We can't. You can't imagine that. There's nothing that would support that idea. So it wouldn't have any true function until it were finished evolving. And because it wouldn't have true function, natural selection should remove it. And this makes the idea of evolution impossible. So evolution theory is not only false, it's impossible. Natural selection kills evolution theory. Evolutionists claim natural selection works within evolution, but it's actually the opposite. Natural selection contradicts evolution and argues against it in so many ways.
Nephilim, I got a question you probably could answer. You might be more familiar with it, and it relates to falsifiability in regards to evolution. And I understand what I've seen falsifiability, the definition of basically is that I know things have to be falsifiable to make it into science or to be considered, as science. And I know that you have to be able to conceptualize of something of a way to prove it incorrect and something you can test or try to demonstrate in order for it to be falsifiable.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to figure out is if something hasn't been shown to be falsifiable, but you can conceptualize a thing about it, then if it's falsifiable, like they claim the theory of evolution is, it's got all these different. First of all, it's got all these different semantics in it, which I think are largely unfalsifiable when you get into the biological semantics and details of this theory. But when you have a part of it and you want to say it's falsifiable, that means that they've tested things about evolution and they found that in fact those things were falsified and they had to move somewhere else. Otherwise, you couldn't claim that the theory was falsifiable, right? They've had to have shown things that were falsifiable about it,
Well, they
right?
would have to show that there was a way to falsify it, not that it has been falsified, but that it should be, according to science, falsifiable. That is, you should be able to conceive of a means by which it could be falsified.
Okay. Well,
But that's not, yeah, go ahead.
the reason I bring that up is because every time you talk, I had the displeasure of engaging Alexia, who gets very vulgar and very crazy in Hangouts. But he was telling me so he was using variations and adaptations to show me. So Ernie, you concede to the first one or two changes an organism can make, but you don't. It doesn't logically follow to you that the next out of 100 changes, that the next 98 changes can't take place. And I told him, no, it doesn't follow. Why would you say that? You're talking about evolution on a different scale. And he says, well, then name me the mechanism that would biologically hinder, or even prevent this organism from moving from micro to macro over time. And I said, wait a minute. If you can't even conceive of it, I said, I haven't heard one. I don't know of one that's been presented, but that doesn't just logically follow that you can say, because you observe these changes here, that something like a Pachycetus eventually
Uh-huh.
become a whale, porpoise, or dolphin. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I'm just trying to say they haven't been able to think of a way of a mechanism that would hinder it from happening. But so they just make that extrapolation and jump up and say, okay, now we're gonna extrapolate to something we've never even been close to observing. So that's why I asked about falsifiability, because you have to conceive of a way for it to be falsified.
Hmm.
And if you can't do that, then they just accept it, right? Oh, so it
Well,
hasn't been falsified. So that's nonsense to me. I don't understand that.
yeah, the thing is that when arguing against creationists, the evolutionists uh, do love to mention falsifiability, but they don't really like to apply that standard to what they believe. That's the thing. It's a hypocrisy. So they'll give you all kinds of imaginary scenarios about what supposedly happened, and this happened, and it had to have happened, and this had to have happened, you know. But they don't like coming up with any arguments for that it's falsifiable. Uh, the thing is that falsifiability really isn't the end all to scientific things. Here's an example of how. Because you can think of could think of a means by which something could be falsified doesn't mean that it doesn't imply that it's true. For example, try falsifying the fact that trees come from seeds. Well, how are you going to, how do you conceive of a means to falsify the fact that trees come from seeds? Well, you could plant, you could get a ground, a dirt, and you could throw all kinds of organic things there in the dirt, make sure it's clean dirt, no seeds in it. And, a big patch of dirt, a field or something, and put a dome around it so no seeds can get into it. Sunlight can get in, glass dome, make it like a terrarium or something. And throw all kinds of organic stuff in there and keep trying and trying and trying until you get a tree, but gee, you never do get one unless you throw a seed in there. But you'd have to do this, you'd have to throw everything imaginable in there. You'd not only have to throw everything organic in there, but you'd probably have to throw entire organisms in there. It's just a process that's absurd to think about, trying to prove that trees don't come from seeds, because everyone knows it's a fact. So coming up with a way to falsify a thing doesn't make it true untrue. But the thing is, evolutionists don't like applying falsifiability to their own theory. They're quite a bit hypocrites about that. I've heard evolutionists say, if a fundamentally different type of organism came rapidly from another, that would disprove evolution theory. That's a nonsense argument. All it would do is prove evolution happens vastly faster than what they claim. So that's not even right. But of course, we don't not only observe anything like that, we don't even observe slow transitions in the fossils. We don't see it in happening in incremental steps. We see two creatures of completely different anatomies in the same strata, and or two creatures of very similar anatomy, and that's when the picture gets more murky. That's where the evolutionist says, look, this one is closely related to that one or came from it because they're so similar. So similarity equals evolutionary evidence to the evolutionist. And heredity, it means common ancestry whenever you can show similarity between creatures. But there's all kinds of problems with that. One of them is that we have now genetic proof that human beings and chimpanzees cannot be related because their recombination hotspot locations are entirely different, and moving them around would cause very gross and rapid destruction of the organism. They would go extinct really quick if you start fixing chromosomal translocations in their genome. And so the similarity between human and chimpanzee skeletons is remarkable, but we've already got proof that they can't be related. It's not possible for them to be related. So see, that's just an example of what I mean. Similarity in appearance or even structural design is not evidence of common ancestry, as evolutionists claim, because we have examples whereby we can show that the argument is illogical, but we also have examples where we can prove it's completely impossible for them to be related, such as human beings and chimpanzees, which we have genetic proof for now. But the evolutionists will never accept that genetic proof. Even though it is proof, they won't accept it. Because evolution isn't based on proof or evidence or anything. It's based on what the evolutionist wants to believe or needs to believe. So science becomes, their preconception becomes science in their mind. It's rather sad. Evolutionism is actually anti-scientific. It's very non-scientific because it's actually philosophy, not science. And it's anti-science because they refuse to accept a massive amounts of scientific discovery evidences. Since they refuse to accept that accrued knowledge, it shows that they're not actually scientific but anti-scientific because they refuse to accept a massive amount of new scientific discoveries which refute evolution. Unfortunately for them, they can't accept that scientific discovery. See, because it refutes evolution, so they deny the evidence, and when they do that, they're denying science. So evolutionists are actually anti-scientific. They're anti-science. They hate. At their very core, evolutionists hate science and they hate the scientific method. They pretend to, and they might actually believe they like science. But you can prove they actually hate science. Because if you apply the scientific method to anything about evolution theory, it won't pass. And so that's when the evolutionist gets angry when you try to do that, because they know their idea won't pass the scientific method. And they have to rely on the millions of years of time, and you just don't have enough imagination to see it happening. See? And they get very upset, a lot of them, when you try to apply the scientific method to it. And what they'll often do is say, well, then let's apply the scientific method to creation. Who observed or tested or repeatable? How can creation be observed, tested, or repeated? You can't do that. Well, that's true. But creation is sort of different. It's a special thing. It happened once. Evolution is supposed to be constantly happening. And by purely naturalistic means, that should make it testable, observable, and repeatable. But we can't test it, repeat it, or observe it.
Every time, Nephilim, it seems that the evolution of cetaceans or is brought up, I seem to get there's a various number of charts that depict the transition from something like a Pakicetus or a land mammal to all these other cetuses in between, and then comes all the way down to the aquatic animal, and then comes to the whale with a tail fluke, which just appears out of nowhere. And I get these same charts and then they, I read a little bit into it, into the articles, but I see these charts and I'm thinking to myself, all of these charts, first of all, are, are artists' renditions of what they think and what they've created out of their mind, based on, maybe based on some fragmented actual specimens that they find, and they
Right.
line these things up in a way that seems to show what they want to believe. It seems to show, none of it really shows one of the creatures turning into the other creature. None of it really shows a step by step thing. Yeah, here you go, right here. And
Hmm.
then, oh, and then look at there, a tail fluke all of a sudden appears on the last one down there. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, this has been modified. I'll explain why. But first, we see this creature that is a dog-like animal. The evolutionists believe moved into the water to become whales. Now, here we see the creative license of the evolutionists. We have Pakicetus, and notice they position the organism to make it look like it's moving into the water. See, it's becoming transitional. See, it's swimming now, where instead of walking. And then Rhodocetus, and then Durodon. Okay, see, these are very different creatures. Firstly, they're very different in size. How does evolution explain something growing massively larger and requiring a vastly greater caloric intake every day? You see, that doesn't even make sense. Natural selection argues against that. But this creature, Rhodocetus, is now a known fallacy. You see, what evolutionists have recently done is they've taken away the fluke tail on the end of that picture. Until very recently, whenever evolutionists depicted this creature, Rhodocetus, they depicted it with a fluke tail because they believed that it was transitional form. Well, a scientist named Gingrich is the one who commissioned the reconstruction and artistic renditions of Rhodocetus, because he was the one who discovered the fossil. And he claimed that it had a blowhole because he believed it was evolution, created by evolution. It would have had a blowhole at the top of the muzzle, which is moving towards being, a nostril, which is moving towards becoming a blowhole on the top of the whale. See, and it would have had a fluke tail. That's what he believed. So when they reproduced this creature, artistic renditions, and made models of it, that's what they gave it. They gave it a blowhole on the top of its muzzle, which was supposedly migrating to be a blowhole in the top of the whale's head, and they gave it a fluke tail. Well, then they found the rest of the fossil. You see, that part of the skull and the tail were not known. They had not recovered those parts of this creature. Later, they did. And guess what? It did not have a blowhole, nor did it have a fluke tail. But because the evolutionists, but they had already made these reconstructions and put them in museums around the world and in textbooks to deceive kids into believing there was a transitional form from whale to whales, because it had a fluke tail and it had a blowhole on the top of its nose. When the fossils, actually later discoveries of the fossil of the thing, they found those parts of the animal and it had neither. But because of his evolution paradigm and his belief, just his faith that evolution is true, he scientifically falsely rendered this creature and deceived lots of people, not based on scientific evidence, but based on what he believed, you see? And that's very non-scientific. That's an anti-scientific thing to do. And evolutionists do this kind of thing all the time. We know the history of evolution theory is rife with such fraudulent displays and renditions of things. And there's even an interview you can watch on YouTube of an interview with Gingrich, in which he acknowledges on camera that they had later discovered the rest of the animal, and it had neither a blowhole nor a fluke tail, and it was his imagination that caused it, that got him to have the animal modeled that way, because he believed it was a transitional form. He admits it on camera. And this is very typical of the behavior of evolutionist scientists and how they falsify things and they do their pseudoscience because of what they believe, because of what must be true in their mind, not because of science. See, it was scientifically incorrect to depict that animal with a fluke tail and a blowhole. But he did it anyway because it had to be true. Evolution's got to be true because it fit in his mind, its shape, what he thought this creature would be in a transition to whales. And so he depicted it the way his imagination thought it would be, not to what science actually showed it to be. And this is just one more of the many examples of fraudulent information presented to the general public in the name of evolution theory. That's how scientific evolution theory is.
Yeah, I see a lot of stuff about it, and every time, Nephilim, I agree with some of these guys a little bit when they start trying to bring people up on charge of not having the degree and not having you're not an expert in the field, but you can ask experts in the field and you can see the information from experts in the field, and then of course they say, well, you have to be the experts in the field to understand the information. Well, there's a certain level you can get to where you can ask somebody for their most compelling evidence, and when you see what they present to substantiate the claim of the evolution on the scale that it is claimed to have taken place, ultimately, when you see what they present to substantiate that scale, it doesn't even remotely touch it. To me, it's like, well, if you want to believe in it, it's something that you just want to believe because you need the theory to fit your worldview, or you need it because that's all you have, then you're going to fight tooth and nail, hand over fist to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're really looking at it from a evidential perspective, and you're willing to take speciation or these little changes, these variations that we see, and you're willing to conclude that some some huge scale happens like what you're just showing me right now, evolution on that scale, well, there's been nothing to demonstrate that. And they always talk about science having to be demonstrably repeatable, or repeatably, demonstrable, so that it can be tested by all kinds of different people. But yeah, so what they've called evolution, what is the definition, Nephilim, that they always refer back to as a change to allele frequencies in a population over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that definition is so vague, it's so wide open, the gate swung so wide open, anything into that to
Mm-hmm.
mean evolution, but that doesn't satisfy the grand claim that land mammals became whales, or or
Right.
or or even where evolution is claimed to have started, which I guess is with like a self-replicating molecule. When you conflate abiogenesis with evolution, they get real mad about that. They get all real bunched up because they don't understand that. They don't have an explanation. They tell you, oh, don't, you're confusing abiogenesis with evolution. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
you tell me where evolution started. It started with a self-replicating molecule, right? It had to start somewhere like this. So you are ultimately claiming that all of this branched out from something like that. Forget abiogenesis. And the evidence that they have to present that I've seen, all of what I've seen, has never been able to compel me. Even Nephilim, setting the Bible aside, which of course I don't do with my life, but setting it aside for the sake of argument, I still have no good grounds to accept this based on what I've been shown. I don't have, my mind doesn't work like that. So I don't, yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they get away with their dog and pony show so much, and they indoctrinate people, especially kids, with this, in the name of science, and without being able to test it, repeat it, or even have evidence that took place in the past or it's happening today. It's unfortunate, and it's going to come to an end. It's just a matter of time. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be quite some time, but it will come to the end because the evidence is just going to become too overwhelming, and they're going to all be standing with egg on their face. And scientists just, and the public is waking up to it as well. that evolution theory is a big controversy, and that even amongst scientists, it's controversial. And so the public is becoming more and more aware, especially because of the efforts of creationists since about 1960 something or 70. And more, it's information that falsifies evolution, arguments that make it that show that it's absence of evidence, and making the case for creation and intelligent design is leaking into the public's mind. And this will only continue into the point where evolutionists will have to give up the whole card house. They'll have to give up the game. They won't be able to sustain it anymore and declare themselves scientific when people are paying for a college education for their kids and they're being taught something that's been demonstrably false for so long. It's shown to be false for so long. It's just a matter of time. It's unfortunately a very painful process to get rid of evolution theory, and a very costly one, and it's very time consuming.
I I heard that conversation in that room with you and Alexia, where you were talking about Niles Eldridge, and I was listening to it. I wasn't in the hangout. I saw it after the fact, but it was in Jungle Jargon's hangout, I think. And you brought up Niles Eldridge and told him that they there it is. Just Google the name, and he come back telling you something about an orthopedist or something like this. So I Googled the name while I was listening to it, and the first thing that I got was Niles Eldridge is an American biologist and paleontologist who, along with Stephen Jay Gould, proposed the theory of punctuated equilibrium. So I don't know what that guy was talking about. I don't know. He acted like he couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, evolutionists, they're very lazy. They don't actually want to look up anything. They this burden of you providing links to every single thing you say is their argument. I'm willing to discuss supposed evidence, but I do want to see the evidence. But when it comes to quoting another scientist on something, they don't like believing that so many scientists have made flat out admissions, for example, that the fossil record of life doesn't show clear evidence of evolutionary transition. They can't stand that idea because they know that if evolution had happened, the number of transitional forms that would be found in fossils would be extensive. And so they can't believe that the scientists have actually made so many admissions to that fact. And so they demand that you provide them all kinds of specific information, like
I'm
the
sorry,
bird.
I cut out.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I was just saying that evolutionists can't stand it that so many scientists have made admissions that fossils don't show clear evidence of evolutionary transition. And so when you quote a scientist on this, they don't want to believe that they've actually said that. And that's why they ask you not only for the quotation, but they want to know the citation, they want the document, they want the time and place, and show me the page, and you know, because they're not aware. I think most of them are not actually aware that so many scientists have acknowledged the fossil record doesn't show evidence of clear transition. They just can't hardly believe this. It's unfathomable to them. They just can't believe it. But it's true. Countless scientists have made that clear admission. And it really hurts them. It goes the wrong way. It cuts the wrong way because if so many scientists have made this admission that all their statements that there's all this evidence of evolution in the fossils is just doesn't wash with what scientists are actually admitting to. And that chaps them the wrong way. They really hate that. So that's why they play this game about getting angry when you quote a scientist who makes such an admission.
I saw a debate once. It was a little bit older of a debate, and it had two different panels. And I guess Eugenie Scott for the what is she with National Academy of Sciences or something like that?
Center for Science Education, I think,
Yeah, and
which
and
is just a face a face organization. It really has no function except to fight the advancement of creation. That's all it is.
Yeah, well, she's very open about that. She's very militant towards like Richard Dawkins against creation too. So she's made that very clear. She also had Ken Miller on her panel, and on the other side, I don't know if it was Behe, I think it was definitely David Berlinski, who I really enjoy listening to. Also, he's a pretty smart guy and had some other people. And he actually got her to say, I mean, she had no choice, but he told her that the fossil record had huge gaps. You
Hmm.
know that it was grossly incomplete. And she didn't want to answer the question. She kind of him hawed around about it, but he kept persisting with it. And finally, she said, yes, yes, but that doesn't prove anything.
Hmm.
Yes, it's incomplete. So yeah,
Yeah, it's an admission. Is this debate you're talking about? Is this a real old one? Is it like the late '80s or something?
it, it might have been. Yeah.
I
It was,
Kenneth Miller looked real young, like he was in his 30s in this one.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
he pulled
yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah, it was Michael Behe, David Berlinski. Um, uh, I'm not sure who else was on the creation side of the or
somebody.
intelligent design side, but I remember seeing that. And Kenneth Miller did his dog and pony show about the evolution of whales,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. He had a little piece of he one of the Berlinski asked for the and he pulled out this placard. He said, "I want to be known as the guy with the placard tonight." And he pulls out Kenneth Miller did, and he kept pulling out these boards, and he had
mhm,
these little sticky notes over these portions of the whale, and he ripped off these two little pieces of paper and said, "There they are. There you
mhm,
go. Here's
right. Yeah,
yeah,
I've seen that one. I saw that a few years ago.
that's old."
Yeah, it was an old debate. I think it was late '80s or probably early '90s. Probably I'd say early 1990s, probably or early to mid '90s. I'm guessing. By the video quality and how young they looked. Kenneth Miller is. I don't know how old he is now, but he looked like he was about 40 years old there, and he's probably pushing 60 now. So that video's pretty old.
It seems like there was another guy who I can't remember. I don't know if his last name was Johnson. He's um oh what did they say? He was also did was a profession. He was an attorney or something like this, but he was um I can't think of his first name. A guy with glasses, kind of a shorter.
Yeah,
Um,
very sort of a Rubenesque looking fellow, rounded, kind of slightly
yeah,
chubby.
yeah,
Yeah, short blonde hair. I think.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember. I don't remember who he is. Wasn't Philip Johnson?
Oh, that's him. Yeah, yeah, it was. It was. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was.
And then there was somebody there. There was somebody there who who uh let me think real quick. Who they said there's a famous quote about him. He was well known too. That not even God understands the mind of they used to say that about. They even made a joke inside of the debate about this guy who was on the side against evolution in the other panel. Um, oh, you would know his name, Neff, real quick if I was able to start getting it out. Um, yeah, can't think of it.
Yeah, I remember watching that. That was quite a few years ago that one took place. A lot of people, evolutionists, are also have a hard time realizing or believing that the evolution debate has been going on for a long time. I mean, scientists have actually been publicly debating evolution for since 1960s at least. Actually, since much longer than that, for over 100 years. But there've become many more of them, and they've become more and more public. Give me just a minute. I need to step away from my computer. I'll be back in just a minute.
I don't know what's going on. I keep getting, I get a call. I'm getting a call from somebody else, and I'm trying to decline it. I'm not answering it, and it keeps it. And once I decline it and push the X, I have an iPad, so I dismiss the window, and then my microphone cuts off. Evan, you there? Neff, did you go away? I guess it did.
Hey, Ernie, you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll be right back. Just give me a minute, about 1 minute. I
Okay.
had to step away.
How's it going? I have Steen. I have Steen. You there?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to take off for a minute.
I have Steen, so I believe came in. I asked him how you doing. I don't know if he's there right now.
Okay.
So Nephilim, I was asking someone the other day about how the moon the moon is right now about 238,000 miles from Earth, and I know it's moving away at a rate of about 1.5 to 2 inches, or maybe a little bit more. I've seen different numbers on that per year. And so, if the moon was formed 4 billion years ago, which it wasn't, but if it was, it says it was 14,000 miles from the information that I read, 14,000 miles away when it was formed, and now it's 238,000 miles away. And I'm just trying to figure the math in this and trying to figure out, how does the uniformitarianist explain? I mean, do you know of a way that they've something that they've put in to try to explain? Because I've heard them say the moon's not moving at the same rate now. Obviously, that's what they'd have to say. But
Well,
they're
yeah, if the moon did form from the same material that the Earth did, its recession would change in speed as it got further away from the Earth because of the gravity between the two of them. The forces between the two would change, so its recession would change, and it would actually slow down. It would be moving away at a slower rate. But um, the formation for the moon, they've had 3 or so theories about how it happened in the past. None of them work. They're just completely fallacious models. One of the problems with the idea is the fact that the moon is virtually void of iron. It has very little iron in it. And the Earth is chock full of iron. So how do you get the moon and the Earth to form from the same original mass of material, and the moon turn out to have very little iron in it, and the Earth's chock full of it? And it doesn't really add up, see? Looks like Ernie dropped out again. Here he comes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Evan?
Oh, I'm getting by.
How you doing, Ernie? I heard you asking me, but I went
yeah, I'm doing.
cleaned out my cookies. And whenever you do that, it takes all the information that you know stored for the Hangouts. You know what mic you're using and stuff like that. And
you got to log back in and
cleans
set everything up.
You know, so I had to go in there and reset everything.
I hate cookies. They're useful for financial websites. You want to check your bank account and such, but for the most part, I just hate cookies.
I like chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
Oatmeal chocolate chip.
Of course, those evolved from chocolate chip cookies. There was once a cookie that had neither chocolate chips nor oatmeal in it. And somebody got the idea, put some oatmeal in that cookie.
Oh,
and
man.
Somebody else came along and put chocolate chips in it.
Oh, don't tell the evolutionists that. They'll go off and run with it. Oh,
So
see, that's proof of evolution.
Well, they do that sort of thing. They'll say cultures evolve over time. Don't you agree? And I'll say yes. Well, no, of course, there's the evolution. Evolution happens to everything. That's the okay. So cultures can evolve. That doesn't have a thing to do with whether or not life can evolve. You know, this whole nother ballpark.
Right. Yeah, I caught your first part of the hangout where you were talking about the whale evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Those are good points you made. But it's not like evolutionists haven't been caught before in the past for falsifying stuff.
Yeah, the whale evolution scenario is probably one of the most ridiculous of all claims of evolution because they have creatures with fins in the back, and then all of a sudden whales. You know, where the fins go, where all the bones go. All I see is a whale and a creature that had fins. You haven't shown me transition anything. Where's the bones disappearing over time? That would be evidence of evolution, you know. To have a creature that had the interior bones, like the pelvis and the femur and stuff, on the inside of it, but didn't have the, or something, but didn't have the, you know, the exterior parts. That would show that it had lost something. We don't see anything like that in the fossil record. They got all the bones or they have none. That's not evidence of transition. That's just evidence of two different kinds of creatures. But because they're both aquatic, the evolutionist believes they're related. They have to be. See, it's just evolution is just beliefs. It's faith. Faith, blind faith, that something is related to another thing simply because there's a similarity in shape. You know, that's where it largely stems from. Oh, this one kind of looks like that. That means it's related to it. No, just means it looks like it. I mean, I can show a similarity in shape between a lot of different creatures. That doesn't make them related. That's not evidence that they're related. You know, I mean, evolutionists they'll say all creatures which have four legs, all tetrapods are related. We're related to lizards. Lizards are related to frogs. Frogs are related to lobe-finned fishes because they have four fins. You know, for two front and two back, and so this similarity, this homologous structure, comparative anatomy idea, is to the evolutionist evidence of relatedness. And the genetics has thrown the whole Darwinian tree of life into a tailspin. And there's genetic evidence now that argues against the phylogenetics ideas, their idea that genetic similarity is evidence of relatedness. There's a lot that's come into being, into a lot of it has been discovered that refutes that idea, or it puts there's a lot of inconsistencies that have been discovered in this idea, and the evolutionists simply can't get on board with that. It has to be true anyway, of course.
It kind of reminds me of there's a YouTube video about a Japanese scientist that he's saying that Darwin's tree of life is actually upside down. That his thinking is that the archaeological record shows that there was a lot more animals at the start of life, and it's actually depleting and going down. It's actually upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, obviously I kind of snickered at that, but you know, he was actually closer, probably more closer to the truth than the Darwinians are.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't realize that the flood is the one cause that, you know, caused all those animals to go extinct.
Yeah. Yeah, extinction, that's what the fossil record shows. A creature still exists unchanged, or in any way that's significant anyway, or, you know, not changed anatomically, or it's extinct. That's all we know. It doesn't show evidence of evolution. It just shows the creatures are extinct. Only in the mind of the evolutionist are they related simply because they have a similarity in shape or something, or they have a similarity in function. You know, when behavior, for example. Evolutionists will take any similarity and extrapolate that into relatedness.
Nephilim. I just was somebody just pulled out their ace in the hole on me the other day. They pulled out the Tiktaalik when they were talking about the transition from fish to amphibian or tetrapod, or I'm not even sure what. I know I've heard used to talk about how, and I've read about how it didn't have at the joints, it didn't have what it needed to support its weight on land. Could you elaborate a little bit on Tiktaalik and tell us why maybe it's not a transitional form?
Well, Tiktaalik is, if you go to your Museum of Natural History in your local city, they'll likely have aquariums there. And if you go there, you can see creatures that look remarkably like Tiktaalik right there in your own museums. They're still existing, this kind of a creature, this kind of a fish with a flat head, a flattish looking fish, lobe finned. They still exist. I've forgotten the species name, but there's quite a few species of it. But the thing about the organism that argues against, I think, the best that Tiktaalik is a transitional form is its shoulder girdle. What the shoulder girdle is it's the bones in the shoulder, like the scapula and whatnot. And in Tiktaalik, the indications are from the bones that it was dermal and not endochondral. What that means is you have an endochondral shoulder girdle, meaning that the bones in your shoulder are attached to your rib cage by cartilage and tendon. They're actually fixed. They're held in place against your chest. But that's not true in Tiktaalik. Its shoulder girdle was dermal. That means it's only held in place by muscles. It's just free-floating bones in muscle, and not held in place by cartilage and tendons fastened to the animal's rib cage in any way, or its spine. And so that's called a dermal shoulder girdle as opposed to an endochondral one. Now, because its shoulder girdle is dermal and not endochondral, it really couldn't support its weight out of water any better than any other lobe-finned fish, which is also dermal. It has a dermal shoulder girdle. You need that cartilage and tendon fastened to the spine in one way or another to support your weight. I mean, effectively support your weight out of water. Otherwise, you just kind of flop around on your belly. So this is not evidence of transition, because if it were transitioning to become a land-dwelling creature, there should be some evidence that its shoulder girdle was becoming or had become endochondral instead of dermal. So judging by the shoulder girdle of the creature, it doesn't show any evidence of transition to land to weight-bearing shoulder girdle. And it couldn't have supported its weight out of water any better than a catfish or any other type of creature, which is able to waddle around on the shore. Catfish do that. They can do that. They've been known to travel across land from one pond to another that are close by. It's remarkable. But that doesn't mean they have weight-bearing shoulder girdles, And the other thing about Tiktaalik is they say that it had more of a neck-like set of vertebrae right behind the head. Well, neck-like, what does that really mean? Well, it just means that because of the distance between the shoulder girdle and the base of the skull, it had a little bit more lateral flexion than a lot of fish. In other words, it could move its head a little more side to side than the typical fish could do. That's not evidence of transition. That's just a variation in the design of fish. Taken together with the fact that a shoulder girdle is dermal and not endochondral, and you've got zero evidence of transition, and Tiktaalik was it.
Okay, thank you. That really cleared it up.
And in fact, also adding to that, which makes it even worse, is that there are fish almost exactly like Tiktaalik, which can be seen in your aquariums in your local Museum of Natural History. There's one right here where I live. I've been to it, seen the thing, photographed it myself. Looks an awful lot like Tiktaalik. I mean, could be his brother, I mean, if these creatures have always existed and they still exist today unchanged, why is Tiktaalik the transitional form? because you want to believe it is. It doesn't. That's not good enough.
Well, you get them there, and then they say, "Oh, everything's a transitional form."
Yeah.
Everything's a transitional form, and it's funny because they don't say that. I don't hear them say that until you get them. You start debunking their examples that they bring up. Then they start telling you everything's a transitional form.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think that evolution is just another altar to a false god?
I'd say it's an altar to humanism in a way. That man thinks of himself as the highest authority and the greatest and latest and the bestest and the one that decides his own fate and what's true and not true and what's moral and not moral. So in a way, yeah, I'd say so. It's a way of man worshiping himself.
What do you think, Ernie?
Could you? I have seen, so I believe. Could you repeat the question again one more time?
Do you think evolution is just worshiping a false god at an altar where they've built an altar and they're worshiping a false god?
Well, the interesting thing about it is that, and I found this out fairly recently, because with Darwin, who this whole thing, I know evolution didn't really start. The idea was proposed a long time before, or at least like abiogenesis and things like this. But Darwin, he had a tragic experience in his life with his daughter, and he from what I've read, he didn't have a need for God anymore after that happened. And it may not have been that the devil was making him do it, or that it was something that the devil inspired, but he created this platform for this thing to rise up, where, just like Nephilim said, people who don't believe in God, or who don't say they don't, who want to have an opposition towards God, they have this other thing where these scientists even say, we have shown you why God is not necessary. Here is how we're showing you that God is not necessary to make all this work. So it's a perfect glove fit for somebody who wants to get away from it. They have something they can move into, and they want to hold to it really dearly. And I know that doesn't speak directly to your question, because I really don't know. My answer is that I don't know about that. But it's just interesting that this man, who ended up having so much influence within science, and who modern day synthesis is still being, they're anchored off of Darwin and what he found, and I know things have changed since him, but he was this pivotal point to creating this thing that by and large is for people who wish to reject God. I know there's a lot of Christians, claiming Christians, who believe and accept the theory of evolution. I don't know why they need to. The evidence isn't sufficient for me, but it is what it is. And so the majority of people who I have experienced to hold so near and dear to this theory are people who don't have a use for God. They don't want anything to do with the idea that God created stuff. So yeah, I guess yeah, and my answer is yes, and then I don't really know fully, but.
Well, the reason why I brought it up was that I've been reading Second Kings, and with all these discussions about evolution, it just kind of hit me, that people don't even realize, even Christians that believe that evolution is true, this is an altar. This is a false thing. And if you're kneeling down at that altar and saying this is truth, I think God would beg to differ with you. And people like Nephilim and a few other people on YouTube that are out trying to expose, evolution as being as such a false thing, I admire them that, they are going out and trying to do this. They're trying to expose lies and trying to smash, the altar of evolution.
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor because it's infecting the minds of children. It's a lie that's being used to indoctrinate children into secular humanism and turn them away from God and to not know that they have a creator who loves them. And it's a terrible lie that needs to be stomped out. That's how I feel about it. It's a lie that they've put forth in the name of science, and even got governments to help them pay for it. And it's been going on so long. The game is over. It's time for we get rid of it, and we need to just smash it and do away with it, and let the truth of God's creation come forth.
How Nephilim? How about meeting halfway with these people who don't want even intelligent design? I mean, yeah, we would love for the Bible to be taught, people to understand the truth of the Bible, but they don't even want intelligent design taught. How about meeting us halfway and allowing all of the contradictory things, all of the challenges towards evolution to be presented also alongside of it in school? I mean, if you're really unbiased and you want to teach people everything there is to know about it, well, about the fact of evolution, quote unquote, well, show everybody all of the experts in the field who have said quotes that are very detrimental to the theory and have shown that these things are still the case today, that nothing about those have really changed, like what you bring up about mutations and just the different things about evolution over the many years it's been being demonstrated against what they claim it can do. Show it alongside evolution. Teach it alongside. And another thing I think is that if you were to teach someone, not even just children, but people who are even high school or more, their minds are a little bit more developed and they're more mature in their thinking, and you present them with something like the internal combustion engine, or you show them other things and you teach them and you say, look, this had a designer behind it. Somebody designed all these things to work together in a coordinated fashion, and here it is. And people would be like, well, of course it did. Of course it did. And then you show them the cell, and you show them animations of things in biology, and you tell them the same thing. Their first response is going to be, of course it did. Of course it had a designer. Unless their mind is all fogged up and plagued by this naturalistic, idea that things arose by chance in a very unintelligent fashion, that they're going to naturally think that. I mean, it's just obvious.
Right. They're going to believe the authorities because they believe science has verified it so much that it wouldn't be an education. See, that's the trick. Get it into the schools and kids will believe it. It's so offensive.
No, nobody likes to be down talked and referred to as stupid and idiot. And you do have some of these guys who have hangouts that bash young Earth creationists, and that's what they call any creationist. Some of them, and that's the way they say you don't want to accept the science that's been shown. You're just stupid and you're an idiot. And I think a lot of Christians, my own personal belief, I think a lot of Christians who accept that, or anybody who accepts that, who claims to believe in God, just doesn't want to be lambasted by people of the scientific community or other people and look like they're stupid. And I could care less what people think or say. I have the Word of God, and I don't want to depend on the wisdom of man, because the Word tells me not to do that. It says that the things of the natural mind cannot even understand the spiritual, and moreover, it says that God has used the foolish things to confound the wise. So, I mean, when I look at all this stuff, I just think to myself, look, I'm not worried. I'm not threatened by being viewed as dumb because I don't accept evolution. I just want you to present something to compel me. If you had something that would compel me, that, again, a land mammal became a whale, not just showing me variations and things on microscopic scales and slight changes, hair colors, eye colors changing, balding, moths that change colors, variations in bird beaks. If you can show me something more to substantiate this big, huge change, I might. I might lean. I'm not going to say I want to believe evolution because I think it's stupid, but I would be more compelled. I just look at the evidence and I'm not compelled. That is honest. I look at it and I'm not compelled.
Yeah. It's not compelling because it's not true. And the rational mind refuses it. And in fact, it's not logical in any way. I see it as a big lie that has really deceived so many people. I felt when I discovered that evolution was false by intensively studying the evidences for and against it, I became outright depressed. I was depressed at first because I felt like such a goof, like I had believed such a big lie. What a dummy me. Shame on me. You moron. How did you believe this stuff? I was really down on myself and I felt cheated. I felt very cheated that people had lied to me and I had believed such. I was ashamed. And over a period of a couple of weeks, that depression turned into anger about it. I remember very clearly being depressed about it. I was very depressed. I'd go to work each day just blah. I was just depressed when I realized, and you would think that I'd be overjoyed, right? That I would discover, oh wow, that's great. Got proof that God actually did make everything. But I was opposite. I was very depressed. But it wasn't because I wasn't happy to know that evolution was false. It was because I just felt like I had been duped and depressed that all the fun that I had in believing evolution was a lie. Because I did believe it and I thought it was fascinating. I used to sit and watch National Geographic and Nova TV shows about it, and I was into it, and I used to imagine those millions of years ago, these supposed transitional things lived, and they got their 3D software animation of it going on the TV screen, and they're talking about it. I was like fascinated, like, wow, that's cool. So cool. Can you imagine being back in time 540 million years ago? Wow. I just thought it was fascinating. And I entertained myself with it so much. I got so much of a chuckle out of it that when I discovered it was a lie, it's like somebody had come into my house, tied me up, and robbed me of everything I owned right in front of me, and I couldn't do a thing about it. I just felt robbed. And then I got angry and have been perturbed by it ever since.
Nephilim, if I could read just a small couple of verses here from Romans 1, which you guys are familiar with, but I always kind of chuckle at this last part that I'm going to read because I always, evolution comes to my mind whenever I hear it. But I'm going to start with Romans 1 in verse 20, which starts to say that, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Then it goes on to say, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but in their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory, and this is the kicker right here, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. And every time I read that, I think to myself, I know that may not have been necessarily talking about evolution. It talks about birds, animals, and reptiles, and I just kind of chuckle about it, thinking to myself, well, it says they exchanged the glory for God for these things. They claimed to be wise and became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images of birds, animals, and reptiles. So it's almost like you're worshiping these things, the creature, rather than the creator, which is a little further up or down. And I
That's
just
right.
I think about evolution when I think that. I think, yeah, it's another idol. It's something that you can have to worship in place of having a God.
Exactly, and they replace God with nature itself. The animal has become God, and they're the epitome of the evolution of life on this earth. So they think themselves the epitome. It's self worship, sort of. But all that's not going to wash. In the end, it'll all be gone, and there won't be anything but the truth. So they can play their games, they can lie and deceive people for a time, but the game will come to an end. Hey guys, it's after midnight, and I guess I need to close out and go because I need to get up in the morning. And so I appreciate you guys popping in, though. I
All
wish I
right.
had the time to start the hangout earlier, but I just had a million things to do when I came home from work today, and I hadn't stopped moving since I came in, and just kind of sat down about an hour and a half ago and got to where I could sit down and do something. So, but I appreciate you guys coming in. I hope you pop in another hangout that I have soon.
All right, Nephilim. Thank you very much for being here. Wish more people would have come, but I thank you, and have yourself a good night. My day's just getting started here, so and I have seen, so I believe. Thanks for talking, man, and you guys have yourself a good one.
All right, Ernie, take care. God bless. And you too, Evan. Take care.
Okay.
God bless.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye.